Now, it is Thursday, and we're at that time where we're joined by Mr. Ramkumar Narinesingh, Industrial Relations Consultant. I do not know if he took the extra classes, the July-August vacation classes with elders, but he seems to be very, very educated in industrial relations matters, and this is a segment that a lot of people have begun to pay attention to because of the information that we're giving in this segment. So we ask that, you talk about it with your co-workers, talk about it with your employer. Say, hey, that was a fellow on Synergy TV on Thursday morning. So you see that way you're telling me there? I learn different from him, This is not how this thing does go. Right? Don't worry, you can't get in trouble. If you do, call Ramkumar Narinesingh. All right, so good morning, man, and welcome back to Breaking Dawn. So this morning we're going to talk about preparedness for natural disasters.
Yeah.
And I am going to give you the floor to explain what employers are supposed to have in place for their employees.
Yeah.
And we were talking before we came on air about the messaging, the communication with the public from the state level, the Met Office level, and then the employer, the employee, and how that chain of command goes, right?
Correct.
So, okay, what went wrong and what went right? Let me put it that way.
All right, so let's first look at the flow of information.
Right.
What we recognized was that information was disseminated by the Met Office starting from as early as maybe Saturday night.
Yeah.
Yet Saturday, Sunday.
What's wrong? Saturday,
people
Sunday,
started getting
over the weekend.
information from the Met Office. And so that in itself allowed for the population to become prepared, both employees, employers, homeowners, etc., etc.
So they would have had enough time.
They should have had. They should have made the preparation based on the information. What we saw on Tuesday, it was Tuesday, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Tuesday was a scramble from between 12 midday to maybe even as far as 4 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
We saw a scramble with people. As a matter of fact, when I was driving out of Diego Martin, I saw lines in the gas stations, and that blew my mind.
I saw a picture of that, and I was wondering, well, what people are rushing to put gas for? Because if you have a storm, there ain't anywhere you could go, So we're rushing to the gas station for typical Trinidadian mentality. Let me one full up my tank. For what?
That's correct. That blew my mind. But what I also saw, Stefan, was and we experienced with some businesses. I had businesses calling me and asking me, well, what to do. First off, the government of Trinidad and Tobago made a recommendation. They closed schools and they recommended that people, business owners, make arrangements to either close their operations or to facilitate their employees.
Stick up in right there.
Okay.
You say they made an announcement, but they made the announcement on Tuesday.
Well, yeah.
It wasn't, you see, it goes back to what you're saying.
All right.
You had the warning since Saturday, Sunday from the Met Office.
Yeah.
Right? So they knew from since the weekend
about
that
possibility.
The estimated time of arrival of this storm would have been Tuesday. As a matter of fact, the Met Office told you. All the international media told you. Yeah. Tuesday, 8 p.m. So not only you get a day, you get a time.
Correct.
But it's only until about mid-morning on Tuesday did people hear, well, they're shutting down everything at so-and-so time.
Yeah.
And the Ministry of Education themselves did not make a decision to call off school until Tuesday.
That's correct.
No, it's until Tuesday.
I think it was
until Monday. Until
night.
Monday evening.
But,
right, yeah,
okay.
They call off school the Tuesday, on the Monday. But the calling off of work and that kind of thing and the endeavors of work wasn't done until Tuesday mid-morning.
Yeah, so I have to concur with what you're saying there. What should have happened was the Ministry of Labor. You see, just as how the Ministry of Education gets involved in schools, I think the Ministry of Labor should have been a little more active or proactive.
Yeah, but where were they?
Approach. Nobody heard from them. Unfortunately, I don't.
Is there anybody? Is there a Minister of Labor?
Well, According to
Is there a Ministry of Labour?
There is a Ministry.
Okay, all right. Still, you sure?
Yeah, we do have some hardworking people in there, but I think the decision to make such an intervention would have had to come from the top.
Right.
And unfortunately, again, we saw the Ministry of Labour. I don't think.
But we didn't even have a top. The top not even in the country.
But hear me.
And the acting, nobody talking about systems.
Okay.
If we're talking about systems, and we want to, and all right, we draw the parallel. You say it comes from the top, right? So the top in the state, in advising public servants, starts with the Prime Minister. In the absence of the Prime Minister,
so yes.
Right. In the absence of and the government is the biggest employer. And the most of the essential services is public sector services.
Yeah.
So, all right, in the absence of the Prime Minister, you have an acting Prime Minister who is supposed to take control and deliver the communication to the public.
Right.
Now, let's draw the parallel to the private sector.
Right.
You have a CEO.
Of course.
Or a chairman. In the absence of the chairman, there is somebody appointed to communicate to the workers and make the decisions on what takes place in terms of a natural disaster. So if there is no communication from either head, well, everybody like a headless chicken just running around in a circle, which is what we ended up with.
So we had a lot of companies where nobody knew what was happening,
right.
and most people playing it by ear, which is a recipe for disaster. So companies should have a plan. And let's just talk about the companies for a minute. I'm going to come back to the public sector.
Right. We're talking about the private sector now. Right.
The private sector, you must have a disaster preparedness plan in your organization. There must be some clear indication to employees that in the event of a natural disaster occurring, based on what type of business that you run, how your business is going to operate.
Right.
Now, we know that there are essential industries, essential business services, or businesses, that form part of the essential services of Trinidad and Tobago. So I'll give you an example. You have gas stations, you have supermarkets, you have medical institutions, you have security. I guess most of those areas there, right? Communication. So like Digicel and all these companies. So these companies form a fundamental part of the essential services.
Right.
And what we saw, I'll give you, use the supermarket as an example. We saw that a lot of people were flocking to the supermarket to get stuff on the 11th hour. Now, the supermarket, that is not recommended, of course. People should have been prepared even before this. The ODPM has been saying since the start of the hurricane season. Yeah. Prepare yourselves, people. Okay, fine, people didn't prepare. The supermarket association, the supermarket industry, not the association, but of course the association plays a fundamental part of this, should ensure that they have a plan for their business operating, until a certain time. Now, what I do know is I think most supermarkets close, the large massy close at 4 or 4:30 if I'm not
some
mistaken.
supermarkets close up at 4.
Yeah. Now,
some until about
take it into consideration that people, all the Chinese groceries open till.
Yeah, because they don't stay easily. Apparently, Chinese.
But anyway, the point is, you must make a plan for your employees, given the fact that you form part of the essential industry, and you're going to have to deliver services up until the 11th hour.
Right.
Right. And that means that you have to give consideration for making possible arrangements. So in the event of an emergency, you're going to have systems in place to allow or provide transportation for staff. That is the most important thing, transportation. That's actually what it is.
Right, because now I'm going to ask you that. And all of the planning that the private sector companies have to do, if you're going to send home your staff early, considering there's a natural disaster, then transportation, you shouldn't have your workers going to get a taxi or a maxi by South Key.
Right. So now that may not be practical as well for all the companies.
Right.
I'll give you an example. Most of the security companies, you can't decide to stop securing the institutions that you're securing because a natural disaster is coming. This is the nature of the industry. They're part of the supplementary police system, and they have to deliver. And it's also not practical to ask a security company to provide transport for all these officers.
Right.
So what most companies tried to do was arrange early relief. Well, because they knew that there was going to, so you ask people to come in early, or you ask people to stay over. Most security companies, prepare yourself now to stay over and that kind of thing. So transportation is one part of it. If your operations can facilitate it, or like a supermarket, you have employees who live far and employees who live near. You could adjust your operation and say, okay, we're going to run with a skeletal crew. People who live near, we will allow them to ask them to work, and the people who live far, we will ask them to leave early.
Yeah.
Now, in any event, right, at the end of the day, the employer, this in the private sector especially, if you know that you can't manage that, then the best decision is, of course, is to let's close this operation and move.
Yeah.
If you're part of the essential industry, you don't really have that leeway as best as possible. You're going to have to, everybody, and this is where another problem comes up, Stefan. A lot of people who work in the essential industry seem to not know that they are part of the essential industry.
Well, as you mentioned that, right? I think the essential services, if you didn't know, during the last 2 years, you're supposed to know what is essential and what is non-essential.
Thank you very much.
Because we had a spotlight on the
right.
essential services during the pandemic, right? So if you're not sure, or if you weren't sure before that you're part of the essential services, you're supposed to be absolutely positive 100%, because it is the essential services that really had to come out regardless of during the pandemic, right?
That's correct.
So I don't know how people will not know that they form part of an essential service at this point.
But what I had was employers calling me to tell me, well, their staff want to leave because they hear a storm coming. Now, what I said to myself, listening to some of the concerns, was that we just started the hurricane season, and this was just a depression moving into a cyclone,
exactly.
whatever, right?
Yeah.
This wasn't even, you had no guarantee this was a category 1 or a category 2. So what's going to happen, because the Met Office made it clear that we are in for above normal rainy season.
So if anything, this was the perfect testing ground for the protocols and to see who have what protocols in place, whether it's public or private.
Correct.
The communication from the state to the public, the communication from the employer to the employee, the decisions that they have to make. This was the perfect opportunity to test your protocols.
Yeah. Now let me just add on my final point on this with the public sector. The government have repeatedly, I don't know if they ignore it or or what, but the management systems in government, their decisions take precedence in this country when it comes to employees and employers.
Right.
The private sector, they do make their decisions in terms of how it's going to affect their business, but generally, employers take pattern from what they see the government doing. And when and like you made the point earlier, when you have the government institutions not having a plan until the 11th hour, or the relevant state agencies not putting out relevant information in a timely manner to make people aware that you need to make a plan. This is the type of situation that we have.
Look at something here, and I'm going to draw a reference to this morning in the paper, right? Maybe you could give me a little answer to this, right?
Okay.
And see if, okay, teachers save the day for hungry students. Ooh. Now, I am going here because it just speaks to what you're talking about, right? Yeah. So you call off school at the 11th hour on Monday for Tuesday. Good? No school Tuesday.
Yeah.
You say school is on as normal at the 11th hour for Wednesday.
Yeah.
So you take a last minute decision and say students are to go to school Wednesday, right? But in doing so, you suspended the National School Dietary Services Limited program for Wednesday. So now the children who are accustomed to getting breakfast with the expectation of getting a breakfast and a lunch, they get to school and they end up hungry. And the teacher, and I know the teachers have a union, so you could speak to this. The teachers now are saying that they had to foot the bill. They had to take all money out of their pocket and purchase breakfast and lunch for the students, or food or a meal for the students.
Yeah.
Now, from an employer standpoint here now, with the teachers having to come out that out of the pocket, what is the responsibility of the Ministry of Education now?
All right, first I'll tell you this.
And if those children were employees, should they be unionized now? Should the school children
have unionized?
Yeah, should the children have a union now? The school children union? The SCU?
When you go to work, you're supposed to be provided with the tools that you need to do your job.
Right.
And when you consider the teaching industry, part of the system or the tools that the proverbial tools that the teachers need is the systems that support their day-to-day teaching
activities,
activities. And that meal forms a fundamental part of it. Now,
right.
I'll tell you something. From an IR standpoint, somebody should face disciplinary action for that failure and be fired.
That's from an IR,
yeah.
right.
You see, and now not one of those...
is this something they could take before the industrial court?
Well, if you fire, if the decision maker for that, whoever made the decision to suspend the
meals.
Food, yeah, somebody, let me tell you why somebody, no, you mean if somebody get terminated for that, if they can take it to the industrial court? Somebody could always take it to, you mean the worker, the teachers?
The teachers that had to foot the bill?
Let me tell you, I don't think even, and knowing the association and the leadership of the association, I don't think that the lobby will really be for teachers to get back their money. Mm-hmm. I don't even think, I would never even go in that direction.
Serious?
I don't think so at all. I'm almost 100%
So what is the direction
I think
here? And how do you establish how much money the teachers should get?
Is that what must be acknowledged is the failure on the part of the system or the persons who are responsible for that system, because the teachers do have a say in calling off
the meals,
or the meals,
the program, yeah. They don't have a say in that.
That is an administrative decision. And when you look at this, Stefan, and this is how simple it is, when the ministry sent out the notice, they made it clear that school is suspended on Tuesday, but school will resume on Wednesday. You saw the notice? You didn't see it? Somebody sent it to me. They made it very clear.
You sure they said it will resume on Wednesday?
When see if you can pull up the notice, or if somebody can send Stefan the notice now.
Let me see.
They made it very clear that school is suspended for Tuesday.
Go ahead.
And
I'll see if I find it.
They're expecting to resume normal school. So that means that, as far as I'm concerned, there was supposed to be no suspension of the school feeding program, and that put the employees who are the teachers in a bind. And what I have to say is, I have to commend those employees and those teachers for stepping up, Stefan, and supporting the nation's children. But somebody should be fired for that decision, because that is not an error, that is a failure.
Okay.
All right?
All right.
That is as far as I will go with that.
But I like how you said that.
Yeah.
It's not an error, it's a failure, because there's a difference between an error and a failure.
Yeah.
Right.
Right? So, in coming back, we as businesses, as institutions,
yes, look at right here. Yeah. Unless further advised by a subsequent circular memorandum, all schools will resume full operations on Wednesday, the 29th of June, 2022. So they made the decision to resume school on Wednesday from the word go, when they gave out.
Yeah, there was a general expectation. So
right,
you know what it should have been? It should have been that food was provided, but there were no children to get it. It should have never been
that it have children
that there
and
were
no
children
food.
there and there was no food. And for me, that when you look at decisions like that, it means that the people who are making these decisions, they are motivated by the dollar value and not the interests of the people who exist in the system, which is the teachers and the children. Right now, we go off a little bit there, but just in bringing it back, at the end of the day, from an IR standpoint, this is one of the things that we must recognize when people go above and beyond. And this happens across companies. People go above and beyond. And I'll tell you something. These people who went above and beyond, they fill a gap for other employees, because I'm sure I know the person who made the decision to suspend the school feeding program is an employee, because it's most probably part of administration. And the people at Trinidad and Tobago employs that person.
Right.
All right.
This goes back to the first one of the most important person in the workplace. And
so
yeah.
what the point about it is, most of the time, what we have, Stefan, is employees who go above and beyond, most of the time, they have to do it because they have to make up for the gap left by another employee. And that's why it's very important when you manage an organization, you make sure that you have systems in place so that the value in the efforts of people who go above and beyond is not lost.
Okay.
Because what would happen, Stefan, if no action comes out of this, is that the efforts of the teachers in feeding our children, right, and in making sure that, and let me tell you, it wasn't only teachers. What I heard, children shared their lunches
with other children.
Yeah, it was this was a social effort, right? And what are we going to be teaching our children now? That it is okay for somebody to be a failure in the system and continue to exist as if everything is okay?
Yeah.
That's what we're teaching our children. So we're teaching them now to go out there into a work environment, to go out there into society now. And when they have to pick up the slack for others, that's normal.
Yeah, but see, come back down. You see, it all comes back down when we talk about disaster preparedness in the workplace.
Yeah.
It all comes back down to communication. And communication, and I've always said this, the most important department for me in any business is the communication department. Because without communication, all hell breaks loose.
Yeah.
Without communication, that's where you have misunderstanding between employees, misunderstanding between employer and employee. Everything just goes haywire. Communication is your #1 department, as far as I'm concerned. Don't get no horrors, I know you're a human resource. But I just say.
Listen, as an HR manager, there have been instances where I have failed to meet that standard of maintaining.
But you have to communicate too.
And that happens, right?
Your communication with any employee is very important too. So when I say communication, not really in terms of a department, but just communication on the whole between departments and employee, because you have to communicate the understanding of what is required of the employee.
Correct.
On a day-to-day basis.
And the expectation of the employer.
And the expectation of the employer. So you have to communicate a certain level of information to the employer so that there is an understanding there.
Yeah.
Bring it back to disaster preparedness. That is what is supposed to take place. If things are communicated properly to the employee, then there's less confusion.
They is supposed to have a clear
policy. But decisions have to be made early.
Yeah.
And it has to be organized.
Now let's switch gears for a minute and talk about salary.
Yes.
I got a lot of messages from people who are asking, am I expected to pay my staff for the time that we closed our business?
Okay.
And people were concerned. Companies made a decision to close, that kind of thing.
Could you toss in, let's just say, I am asked to stay on for an extra hour.
Okay.
In terms of a natural disaster like a hurricane or a storm, I'm asked, hey, who could stay on an extra hour, extra 2 hours? But am I entitled to get a double time, triple time,
that's the easiest
extra compensation? Go ahead.
So the first instance is, of course, there's the minimum standard of employment relations in Trinidad and Tobago, the Minimum Wage Act, and it establishes that, once you complete your established hours of work, anything that you add, you work additional, you're supposed to be paid your overtime for it. So there's no two ways about it. You paid for your overtime. Yeah,
but am I paid extra?
Extra in the
context it's not. I haven't worked my full hours for the day.
All right.
But because we're closing early, but then you ask me to stay back a little extra.
Well, it can't be extra.
But it comes with a risk.
All right, so let me.
But it comes with a risk. But it comes with a risk.
You can't make it.
So you ask me to leave later. I might leave in the middle of the rain. Once in the rain, I might get caught in flood. I might say, okay, I'm here for you.
Okay, listen. If your hours of work are 7 to 3, they close off operations at 2, but they ask you to stay till 3, it's still 7 to 3. You can't get overtime. There's no additional risk pay.
All right.
Let's just set that aside.
No problem. You're looking for that, but go ahead. Yeah.
I understand what you're saying, but that would be a false expectation. What is established is if the employer makes a decision to close its operation before the end of the workday, they become obligated to cover the hours.
The full
hours,
day.
yes.
Right.
Because it's not I understand it's not the fault of the employer, and I also understand it's not the fault of the employer. But given in industrial relations, all things being equal, it is considered. At the end of the day, the alternative is the employer does have the right to say, well, we're going to stay open until 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
Now, yes, it's going to be very inconsiderate, and it's going to sour the relationship you have with your staff for no clear reason, because you're now putting your people at risk for no reason. You're probably putting your own business at risk, right? I got a message from somebody yesterday in a joke. They messaged me and said, hey, they should message Republic Bank and let them know the storm coming, because you know what happened in Cuba. And if they could do that in regular weather, what they could do? So no, I'm serious. The person, I told the person, I said, hey, send that to the police. You know, what your concerns are. But anyway, the point is, there is a measure of risk, and you have to be considerate for employees. But once you make the decision to close your business, it's your decision. You're supposed to maintain your hours of pay for your employees. If people work past their regular hours, they should be paid the necessary overtime structure. Yeah.
What about like the next day? Let's just say, okay, well, you know, the Met Office advises that the weather, you know, it wasn't as bad and it missed us.
Yeah.
But for some reason or the other, the next day, which is supposed to be a normal working day, there is heavy rainfall during the course of the morning and people don't come out to work. Are they expected to be paid?
All right, so let me answer you. Definitively, no.
No.
Now, here's the thing, right? Yesterday, a lot of people actually did stay home. I had a lot of messages as well notifying me that people called in and said they were sick or they get rained out.
Get sick between
now, what's interesting is some people complain of being flooded out in some places that didn't have any rain.
Is that not a legitimate?
Oh no, that is a legitimate reason for somebody not coming to work.
But it doesn't qualify them to be paid for the day.
And that brings us back to what we discussed a little while ago, two episodes ago, where people, and this was something how much time do we have this morning?
Well, we only have 4 minutes. We only have 4 minutes.
You know what? Next week we're going to talk about personal leave and what constitutes legitimate expectation for pay and what doesn't.
We'll also get interactive next week as well. We'll do a question and answer. So we hope you all have been paying attention over the last, 3 weeks? 4? It's 5
episodes, yeah. It went real quick.
We hope all have been paying attention. So like from the start to now, any questions that you all might have next week, we will create a window there for at least 10 to 12 minutes, I think. And we'll just take calls and go back and forth with you. Any concerns you have, maybe you have experienced something in the workplace and you feel like you haven't gotten any sort of real action to deal with it. Maybe Mr. Narinesingh, not us, but Mr. Narinesingh can advise you on that. But before we run out of time, you wanted to mention something.
Yeah, but let me just close by saying this. If we are, in fact, at the end of the day, where you have, to be clear, employees, their salaries must be maintained. If people stayed home the next day after, which would have been the Wednesday, and you have an expectation to be paid, unfortunately, that is not a legitimate expectation because there was no clear reason, unless you're flooded out, right? But even in that instance, the employer is not obligated to pay you. Now, people running late yesterday, employers should have had an understanding for that. But even in those circumstances, there is no real system that allows you to have an expectation as an employee that you must be paid for time not work because of you running late. And I think next week,
Even with the
weather, and that is where we need to go in depth into that because I think people have the...
Very interesting.
It is. Yeah, it's going to be a little heavy, and some people are not going to agree, but that's fine. I can explain why.
So if I get up and my house flood out, and I cannot come to work,
there is no entitlement that you must be paid. What the difference is, you ought not to be facing any disciplinary action for your inability to come to work, right? But to have the expectation that you must be paid, that's a false expectation. Unless you put in for leave, some kind of legitimate leave, not sick leave, and we will also talk about that.
I could ask you that. If I could take out that sick leave.
There are employers who facilitate employees claiming sick days for days that are not sick. They say, well, you're going to put in a sick day now. Or you have employees who are claiming sick days for days that they're not sick. So I think we really need to get into that. But I remember I mentioned to you in the last episode, there's no such thing. The only legitimate leave existing in law is maternity. I think I made a mistake.
You said paternity,
yeah,
but maternity.
Vacation, and legitimate sick leave in accordance with Section 77 of the Industrial Relations Act. And you have jury service, that is also a legitimate.
Jury, yes, they call it a jury service.
Jury service. And but to say that you have any other type of leave, like paternity leave and casual leave and what's the other thing, that bereavement leave,
yeah.
There's no law for that. That's those things are practices. I will shed some light next week on how the relationship can be balanced and how leave should be balanced.
But let me ask you something just before we run out of time here.
No problem.
Considering what took place this week,
yeah.
Considering that the storm missed us, considering that everything was kind of last minute, do you think it was last minute because the typical Trinidadian thinking is that, hey, there's another warning and it'll just pass us? And you know what? Let me don't take that on for now. If the Met Office puts out certain alerts or things turn for the worse, then we will make a decision. Do you think it's based on the Trinidadian mindset that God is a Trini and it's going to miss us? And it having missed us, where does that put the mindset for the next warning that we might get? And what should employers be doing right now if they have nothing in place?
I'll start with your last thing quickly. Employers need to have a clear policy on how you're going to be managing the possibility of an impending disaster. That's the first thing. The second part, to answer the first part, Trinidad and Tobago we've always had this culture of being reactive instead of proactive. You look at a lot of things happening in the country, that has always been a trend. Now, I think most of the reaction yesterday, on Tuesday, had nothing to do with the announcement from ODPM and had more to do with people seeing other people rushing.
Right.
I think that got the entire population in a frenzy when they started to see segments of the population rushing. And I can tell you this because I looked at what happened in Diego Martin versus what was going on in Aranguez. I'll give you an example. I saw people in Diego Martin rushing in a frenzy and people in Aranguez was just going about their normal business. I am telling you. So I realized that I think people were more reacting to what they saw other people were doing.
Yeah.
And that for us is not very good at all. It means that we are not thinking about the possibilities for ourselves and not making a proper plan. I agree with you 100% that our communication system in this country needs to be a little more enhanced, and we need to have more clear and definitive plans from our leaders in terms of how to deal with these things. Yeah.
All right. So I want to thank Mr. Narinesingh for coming in this morning. You'll be back next week, Thursday. Yeah. Some people messaged me some things which I will put to you. I'll forward you the messages.
Okay.
But if you want to contact Mr. Narinesingh and you need his expertise or his services, all you have to do is call 471-8957. That is 471-8957. The number is on the screen. You could give him a call and he's willing to work with you. Or your company. We especially want to encourage business people. If you want your business to thrive and become more productive, Mr. Narinesingh's services are available. So 471-8957 is the number to call. So thanks a lot. And next week, man. All right. We will be back after this with a little Point Kumana controversy. Stay tuned.